Code Software.
So what episode is this going to be? 8?
This will be
7?
episode 8, right?
This will be 8. Okay.
Yeah, 7 was the MVVM.
Welcome to the To Code Software podcast, episode number 8, Battle Stations. Is that dramatic enough?
Yeah, that was perfect.
I am one half of the hosts, Tim J.
And I'm Tim Purdom.
The other half of this dynamic duo.
Right.
And all Battle Stations, besides bringing up Babylon 5 and Deep Space Nine, it is computer setups, specifically more like big desktop setups that are so large they look like they could be the command station for some sort of army.
Yeah, so we decided this would be kind of our hardware episode where we just talk about our battle station, our setup, how we work day to day, and what hardware components do we use for that. We've been talking about software as far as development goes and talked about Rider and Visual Studio and all the different tools that we use day to day. And so now it's kind of the hardware side of that. And Tim, you said you wanted to start with maybe going back a little bit and working into the history of what hardware you've had in the past.
So my first computer I ever got to play on was an Apple Macintosh 2E. You have to take a look for that one up there. That is a very old computer. Yeah. I remember that it had a hard disk slot, a big one. It was 9.5 inches across, and it was a half inch thick. That was a specific type of hard disk. And it had this silly moose that would speak to you if you typed things to it, and all these wonderful games where you could fill in pictures of dinosaurs, all grayscale, of course, and print them out to the attached dot matrix printer. And I have such fond memories of wasting so much time on that old Macintosh. But that was when I was very, very young. My dad had access to computers through his company that he worked at, so they were always available.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had a similar machine. I didn't have one, but my high school had one. So probably right around, I'm that much older than you, that right around when that came out. I don't remember if that was the exact model, but it was definitely black and white, early model Macintosh. And that really was like the introduction of the Windows model. I mean, the GUI that we still use, that every operating system pretty much uses this to this day.
Yeah. I dodged a lot of that early command line, DOS era. Like I actually own a PC Junior. That's a long story. But I was way too young before all of that. So I didn't really start using computers until GUIs were fairly common. I kind of skipped over Windows 3.1, and it was really Windows 95 when my family got their first big computer. It was a Gateway 2000. You'll have to look at that. The tower was, 3 feet tall, like 100 pounds of steel in this thing. But it was wonderful. It had like a color monitor but even that was Windows 95. So that would have been, sometime after 1995. But I did only get a little bit of exposure through DOS just whenever you had to drop to the, DOS prompt in order to get old games to run.
Right. I think I mentioned before that one of my first computers was the Commodore 64. And so I did have some of that early, it wasn't DOS, it was actually pre-DOS, but it was basically just writing BASIC at a command prompt and then running it. And that was all you could do with the Commodore 64 was write a BASIC program and run it, or load one from disk. And so that's how you would play video games and things like that. And they did have early word processors and things like that you could run from disk. But yeah, that was pre any type of GUI at all. And you mentioned Gateway, and that made me think it's so interesting also how the companies come and go. And Gateway was huge in the late 80s, early 90s. It was like everyone had a Gateway. And before that, IBM, of course, those early PCs even before Windows, but especially when Windows 3.1 was around and stuff, everyone called them an IBM clone because IBM had kind of designed that home computer box that you were describing from Gateway, where there's like, okay, you're always going to have the disk drive and you're always going to have the graphics card and whatever other pieces are in there. And so for a long time, we called those IBM clones. And now IBM, I mean, they're still a strong company, but they actually sold their PC line to Lenovo years ago and don't even do PCs anymore.
Yeah, I do have fond memories of that old Gateway. I got to play a lot of Doom on it, so it was there. That wasn't my first computer. I got my first computer a few years after that. My parents graciously sent me to a big summer camp at the local university, which was teaching kids, so like teenagers. I don't remember how young I was at the exact time, but how to build computers. They would go to a computer store, pick out all of the components, kind of research how to like pick good components out. And then we took it back and we would build our PC, and then we would like install all the software and get them working. And it was just a really fun summer course that at the end of it, I owned my own computer. And I remember how happy I was with the 1.2 gig hard drive. Like, that was impressive at that time. I think I might have had a 3-button mouse on PC. It was like, ooh, a third button. You can, use that in Doom and all these other things. And I don't remember much else about that computer, but that was my first computer. And I used that thing for like years and years and years. And I just would like keep upgrading it. Just, time to put a new motherboard in, and replace the hard drive. So it kind of became the ship of Thesis, where toward the end, I don't know if any of the components were original at all. But then at some point, enough stuff changed that it was time to move on. But I will never forget that first computer.
Yeah, I don't think I did that building my own until quite a bit later, but I did buy several of the generic Dell or maybe Gateway. I can't remember. I don't have that much recollection, but towers. And then I would do minor upgrades, like replace a graphics card because I wanted to play a game, Doom or something, and the graphics card was not up to snuff to play it. So I would buy a new one, stick that in, or some new memory. The other thing I remember about kind of that era was the CRT monitors, the gigantic monitors that would, you could get a big screen, but then if you had a big screen, you had like 3 feet back of depth. So you'd have your desk like pulled way out so that you had room for that.
I had a 28-inch one that was like 150 pounds that I would cart to LAN parties with. It was just awful.
Right.
Because that, and then after that computer came another series of them. I don't remember, have a lot of memories specifically, but they were always glowing. I had to have lights in the case, and it was always state of the art everything with insane graphics cards because I was in that gamer LAN scene. I would go to LAN parties all the time. I built all of my siblings a computer. We were just like hand-me-down parts or like super insane deals I would catch online. And built them all computers. So we had a LAN set up at my house that we all had our own computers. So we would like play Unreal Tournament together and just, I remember death matching with my sibling. That was really like my whole motivation during that time was building computers strictly for gaming, because that's really all I used them for.
Yeah. When I was a teacher, we'd always have something provided for us at work. And I remember we had the iMac that was the colorful like shell. Do you remember this?
Yes.
Like
I loved those.
Like there was pink and there was blue, and they built the PC into the CRT monitor basically so that it was just one big blob. And I had to work on those, and I pretty early on, like right around the year 2000, I started getting into laptops. And of course they were, heavy, chunky things, but that's what I would try to buy for myself was whenever possible was some form of laptop. I want to say my first one was a Dell laptop.
So you were still in PCs at that time.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I was working on Macs for work, but for myself, I would still always buy PCs. Yep.
My first laptop would have been circa 2000 myself,
Yeah.
because I was going to college and I needed a laptop for college. And so I bought, it was a Toshiba something, but it was my workhorse. All of my years of college, just by my side, every class, beat it up, took it everywhere.
Mhm.
And I really enjoyed having a laptop. And it is something that I would have a few laptops, like 4 or 5 throughout the next couple of years, but it was never super consistent because it's not exactly cheap to own a full gaming desktop and a laptop. And so it was very often like, as soon as I was in the ability to kind of settle down and have a battle station again, I would do a desktop, and then whatever laptop I have, I would usually like give to a sibling, or my wife usually uses my hand-me-down laptops as well.
Yep. Yeah, we do the same thing here. My son has inherited several of my machines, which was one of my excuses for buying the new Surface Book. That, well, I don't have anything that's still just mine.
Yeah. Yeah, we got the new work laptop. I haven't had a laptop of my own for several years, and having the work laptop has been very nice. It absolutely convinces me that if I don't ever have access to a laptop in the future, I will buy one, because I just find it so very useful to have both.
Yeah, definitely. Just being able to move away from your battle station when you need a change of scenery. And if the world ever reopens, I love going to a coffee shop or to the co-working space that I was working in last year, and just get different variety, different environments to inspire you.
My wife uses laptops. That's all she's ever had. She's never owned a desktop. And she really likes doing that. Take the laptop, go out someplace, write things down. It's very creative. It helped get us through a couple years of Japan. I always made sure she had a laptop that was very, very good, so that she could take it into the coffee shops there and plan lessons and all of that. So she would very much agree with your sentiments on where you would move to and getting to that change of scenery.
The other thing that's kind of driven my purchases and my interest in laptops for a long time is actually I was very interested in tablet PCs the first time around, pre-iPad. So we're talking mid-aughts, like 2004, 2005, somewhere around there. I had an NEC tablet PC that had a completely separate keyboard, and it was it looked a lot like the Surface looks today. It was not nearly as stable and not nearly as fast. And, it was a much more primitive implementation, but it worked. And I would take handwritten notes with that, just to-do lists. And if I took a class to, a college class or something, I could take notes with it. And I just loved that tablet format. And would
that have been Windows XP tablet edition era? Or is that before, like, even Windows really had a tablet specific?
I can't remember. Is XP, that was after like 2000 and ME and all that, right?
Yeah, it was what, 2003, 2004? Yeah, here we go. We don't even know when XP came out.
Yes, that would be the right time frame. So I'm sure it was that tablet edition, but it was full Windows.
Yep.
But there were definitely trade-offs, because they're trying to make a thin tablet laptop that at the time you couldn't get that much power into that form factor. So it ended up being a fairly slow machine, and not performative at all for graphics or anything like that. So
it is remarkable to think about that miniaturization, to think back at like what a tablet back then compared to a tablet nowadays, just how thin everything is.
Yeah. So you asked me about Macs, and I didn't really start getting into Macs until, well, let's see, several years there I had a nice laptop, Windows laptop from school, so I didn't have to buy anything. And then when I started looking at switching careers, that's when I went to the Mac. And the reason I went to the Mac is that I was starting looking at Swift and iOS development, and I loved my iPhone, and I trusted Apple to make a solid machine that would hold up and do what I wanted it to do. And I've always felt like the main difference is, like, in Windows, you have more options, but you also have more ways that you can break it. Whereas with the Mac OS, or OS X at the time, you didn't have as many options. You didn't have as much control, but it was less likely to break on its own. It's more likely to keep running. Not that it never crashes. I mean, there certainly are things that you can do to make a Macintosh crash, but that was the trade-off. And so I thought, well, I want something that's dependable, and that's why I bought. Well, I guess I have 3 Macs. I have a Mac Mini that we kind of use as a TV, data server,
like a media
thing,
or PC sort of thing.
Yeah, like a media center. And then I have a Mac Air and a Mac Pro, or MacBook Pro, I mean. And those are the only ones that I bought. And of course, my family is still using those. And like I said, they last forever. So yeah, I think it was a good purchase at the time.
Yeah, I've never really owned any Macintoshes directly. I do have one of the boat anchors, the old colored iMacs with a screen built in that you were talking about. I got one of those just given to me, and it's sitting somewhere in my parents' basement, probably. But I've worked with Mac hardware a little bit, but I never really got into it. But having been always kind of very familiar with PC-centric hardware, I never really needed that sort of thing. And plus, gaming is always been generally considered better in the Windows world. And that was always something that I was chasing. And so it was really not something I needed to dig into.
No, that makes perfect sense. So anything else about the history of, I mean, you were pretty much just building your own machines and then buying the occasional laptop when you needed it. Does that kind of bring us up to the modern times?
Well, I can happily say every computer I've ever built myself in the last, I would say 12 years is actually still running right now and somebody's using it. And that's kind of one of those things that I will stand behind. Like, if you pick out the right components, you do the work yourself, it's done well, those machines will keep going. My computer I owned before my current one, I gave to my little brother, and he's using it as his primary PC, and he's still gaming on it even today with modern games. And so I will always recommend building your own if you're doing desktops.
I definitely agree with you. I forgot to mention, I did do one build of a desktop myself, and so that was more recent, about the same era as when I was getting into Macs, but after I had started using .NET and Visual Studio and things like that. So I kind of wanted a strong desktop machine. And so I went out and I researched and I bought all the pieces, like you're saying. And that is now, my son he has my MacBook Pro and that. So, spoiled child, but that is his flight simulator. So he is huge into airplanes and flying. And there's a couple different simulator softwares. There's the Microsoft Flight Simulator. There's one called X11, I think. I don't know. He could tell you all about it. But he also has the hardware. He has the rudder, or not the rudder. What's that called?
The flight stick?
Yeah. Well, it's a yoke. It's like the two-handed.
Oh, the steering wheel thing.
Sort of, yeah. And so he has that where he can actually control the PC with that. And he's got these levers that you can pull up and down. And so he's got all these and hardware switches like buttons. So it's very much a simulation of real flying. And he'll spend hours doing that. And he'll say, yeah, I flew from Chicago to Denver today. And I didn't leave the basement. So building that from scratch obviously was a good idea, as far as I think it was a lot cheaper than it would be otherwise. Certainly than when I buy a laptop, it was much cheaper than that. Let's talk about our modern day workstations. So we should probably just start with the PCs since we've been talking
Yeah.
about that mostly. So what are you working on right now?
All right. So my current battle station is, well, I built it. I actually even have the invoices and all of that at the end of November in 2017. So it's not quite 3 years old right now.
Mhm.
And basically, I picked it out to be on the mid-high end of the spectrum. Anybody who builds computers knows you kind of hit in a certain price point. And
Mhm.
I like to build just short of cutting edge because that's usually where I'm the most comfortable dropping my money. It's an i5 8600K. I chose an i5 over an i7 because the i9s were real expensive at that time, mostly because I'm focused on video games. And at that time, they really didn't take advantage of extra cores that an i7 would offer. And the i7s were quite a bit more expensive.
And
It's
just
an
to
86.
clarify here, we're talking about the Intel CPU chip,
Oh,
right? When we say
yes.
i5. Yeah.
Yes. To be
And just in
specific,
case
yeah.
some of our listeners don't know what i5 and i7 are. Yeah.
Yeah. And then it's a K processor, which means it's unlocked. And I chose a really nice motherboard that can let me overclock my CPU and overclock my GPU, which I haven't needed to do yet. But it's the reason I was able to use my old computer for about 8 years is because I always try to get components that can be overclocked later. So once my computer starts feeling a little sluggish in current gen games, I can usually overclock it and get another year or two out of it anyway. So that's my CPU. I have 16 gig of DDR4 dual channel RAM because I wanted at least 16 gig. I've been thinking about picking up another 16 to go to 32, but 16 is usually pretty good for what I'm doing. I'm not often, opening that many programs at once.
Mhm.
The big one is I have a GTX 1080 Ti video card, which up until kind of recently when they did the RTX 20 or 2000 series was the fastest graphics card you could get before you got into some like two of them in line and lots and lots of money, which is really nice because it still lets me run games like Doom Eternal at 2K 60 FPS smooth as silk.
Right.
And that's kind of the core of it. I've got a 512 gig SSD. I don't remember who makes it. Just as my main drive, I've got another 8 terabytes of 7200 RPM just disk drives for storing media, stuff I really don't care about. I have another 128 gig drive that's just a backup drive. I just back up my whole system to it as just a random redundancy. But that's the main components of my computer. It glows. There's lots of RGB all over it. The side of my wall is various different rainbow shades throughout the day.
Nice. Yeah, that reminds me a lot of when I was building, because it wasn't that long ago that I built the Flight Simulator PC. And I don't know if I could remember all the specs, but I actually ended up going with an AMD, was it Ryzen? Because they were really, when I bought it, it was just one of those moments when AMD had really like jumped past Intel for a moment, and they were saying this is the thing to get. And I did the same thing you're talking about, where it's like I can't buy the most expensive newest one, but I decked that thing out. It has either 32 or maybe 64 gig of RAM. It has the AMD Ryzen, and it has, I should look up the graphics card because I spend a decent amount of money on that as well. But I don't remember off the top of my head what it was because I'm not a gamer. So I don't, I mean, I play games, but I'm not a gamer like you are. So I don't keep track. Now, my Surface Book, and we started talking about it last week, but because that's what I'm running right now as we're talking, and that's what I'm using primarily. So it has the i7 1.3 gigahertz CPU, but it has 32 gigabytes of RAM. I have 4 cores, and base speed is 1.5 gigahertz, which seems really slow. Like that's slower than our work computers, but I haven't noticed any issues with it.
Well, it may be throttled up or throttled down depending on how it's reading it.
Right. Okay, and my graphics card is an NVIDIA GeForce GTX 1660. So, I'm sure that's not top of the line, but as far as a laptop, just to have any dedicated graphics card is always a good thing, because a lot of laptops don't have a dedicated graphics card. They just have one built in. And actually, it's really interesting on the Surface. So if you take it off the base, it also has an Intel integrated graphics card. So like if I use it just in tablet mode, I can't play games on it. I can't play, I've been playing Halo on it because Halo is one of my favorite games. And if I take it into tablet mode, I can't do that. But as long as it's docked with the keyboard, that's where the NVIDIA card is. So it'll run off that. I think that's kind of neat that it's got both of those running.
Mm-hmm. Crazy how quick computer hardware comes along. When I built mine to now, like how much faster CPUs are, how much more RAM is considered to be kind of like a minimum amount or a recommended amount.
Yeah, the RAM, and it seems like 90% of the time you're not using it, anything above 8 or maybe 16 max. Mm-hmm. But like for work, we've seen with our large solution that we develop, we've seen it where you hit your RAM limit and then things start slowing down. And even more so, that gigahertz speed of the CPU, it didn't matter how many cores you had. You were limited by the actual speed of one core because Visual Studio wasn't taking advantage of the multi-cores enough.
Mm-hmm.
So it was still slowing us down.
Yeah.
Should we do monitors next?
Oh yeah, because you got all this hardware. You figure what you're going to play with it. And right. I'm spoiled. 3 monitors. I've had 3 monitors since coming back to the United States from Japan, so quite a few years ago. I love having multiple monitors. I cannot work with just one. I really need at least 2, and 3 is just very symmetrical. So on my left and my right, I'm actually using work-provided Acer B286HK's monitors. They're 4K 60 FPS monitors. They are very crisp. They make code look excellent on there, and they look really wonderful as my right and left monitors, just having big old 4K displays. And that's one really nice thing about having a really insane graphics card is I have DisplayPort and HDMI for all of my monitors, so they all run at maximum frame rate, at maximum resolution all the time, which is pretty nice.
Yeah, and I'll just jump in there real quick and point out I have the exact same 2 monitors from work that you have, so they are also a big part of my setup.
So my center monitor is my own monitor that I was using with this gaming PC before I started working here. And it's an Acer Predator XB271HU. That's fancy speak for saying it's a 2K monitor, but it runs with G-Sync, so it has a 144 megahertz refresh rate. And because of my graphics card, I can play games at 2K at around 120 megahertz, because 120 is a little bit kinder to most games, flawlessly. So that's what I want to do with my monitor. I didn't want to go up to a 4K, but then only get 60 FPS. And at 1K, you really couldn't get any higher. So I picked this one out for being really good with that. It's an IPS. It has G-Sync, so it looks perfect. It's my main monitor to look at stuff on because it never makes my eyes tired, ever. It's not as big horizontally as the main monitors, but because of that, the pixels are invisible.
Right. Yeah, so my third monitor is much cheaper and much less impressive because I was not a gamer, and I bought it when I was striking out on my own and just to hook my MacBook up to. And so it's a relatively small Vizio, which is, a pretty cheap brand, I guess I would say. And it's a HD monitor. So I guess that would be 1K compared to the 2K or 4K.
Yep.
And so you can see some pixels on it. The color is not great either. But what I do with that one is I have it in portrait mode in the middle, and I put Slack on it. And so that is my chat window. It's always on that monitor. And then I work on the 2 monitors on the side, the 2 large monitors from the company. And that works out pretty well.
Yeah, I have Slack takes up the right half of my left monitor. Discord takes up the left half of my left monitor. My main monitor is coding, and my right monitor is looking up stuff on the internet and my media player.
Right. I probably would rather have the code right in the middle, but it just wasn't possible with my setup as it was. I think I could move it now. Let me mention one other related thing to that. So you have 3 monitors. Are they all on their own platforms, or are you using some sort of ARM system?
They're all on their own platforms because I have a 20-foot desk in my office.
Yeah. That's ridiculous.
Came with the house. True story.
Okay. You're not really using, I mean, you're not.
I occupy about 12 feet of this desk.
Okay.
That's because I can really stretch all my cords out, and I've got, 10-foot HDMI cables and such strung out.
Uh-huh. So the reason I asked is I bought a 3-monitor ARM, and I thought, oh, this would be great because I got 3 monitors, and then I can, just grab them and position them. And I found it less useful than I want it to be, because the only way to get it set up was to put this vertical old monitor in the middle. Otherwise, these 28-inch 4K monitors are just too big, and they would run into each other, even if I had the arm stretched at full capacity. And then I took everything downtown, or I took the 2 nice monitors downtown for a while. And then when I came home, they're still sitting on their own bases, which are actually really nice springy bases that you can, tilt and adjust things really easily. So I think if I got rid of the arm and found my old legs for my old monitor, I could actually move that to the side rather than having it in the middle, which would be kind of nice.
It is nice to be able to stretch out. You just be able to take up as much room as you can, because I have this nice little curved thing. My front monitor is perfectly flat. The 2 ones are very angled. So it's this nice little cove. And instead of using a mouse pad, I actually found these really nice, they're like keyboard and mouse pads. It's about, I would say, 3 foot across and about 1.5 feet wide. And it's made out of a mouse pad like material, but it sits underneath your keyboard and your mouse. It's really nice because my mouse pad is this just massive, 2 foot by 1 foot square that I can move the mouse anywhere. And it's all really nice texture to write on and touch.
All right.
It was relatively inexpensive. I can throw up a link to the one that I use. I really like it. They're apparently machine washable if they get something spilled on it, but they look really nice. And it's been just something I've really enjoyed at my desktop.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm going to mention my desk next because we already talked about you have a giant built-in desk. Well, anything else you want to say about the? I mean, you didn't build it, obviously. You said it was already there.
No, it's cheap, and someday I will make it better. But it's nice just to have a lot of room.
Yeah. So I did have a cheap IKEA put together desk. It was big, 4 foot wide by 3 feet deep, and I had that for a long time. But then I decided I wanted a standing desk, and so I bought this one's. It was actually built by Titan Fitness, which is, they mostly make weight machines and things like that, but they build good quality stuff. And it's got the automatic motor where I can just press a button and it will remember my height. And so I can stand and sit very quickly during the day and keep working. And since it's that same size, 4 foot wide by 3 feet deep. So it keeps everything, all my monitors go up together. My keyboard goes up together. So I just everything stays exactly the same, except I get to stand up. And that's really nice.
I've always wanted to try a standing desk, but right now the space all of my equipment takes up is far bigger than any standing desk that I've seen, without getting into a little too expensive. But that's why I like kind of taking my work to my laptop and just going and sit downstairs or stretch out someplace. I use that as kind of my way of not sitting all day.
Right.
Although I have a very good hot spot for today related to that. We'll get back to that.
Yeah.
So on my desk, mechanical keyboard. I'm one of those guys. I have to have my mechanical keyboard. I heard people hyping them up for years. I said, you know what? Why not? I'll buy something nice that's on sale. Picked out Cherry Blues as my switches because everything I read said it fit what I was looking for. Took me a little while to get used to it, and I've never been able to type as fast. It works really well. There's something about the tactile sensation and the way that it works. I use it for playing all of my video games. I use it for all of my coding. I own 3 mechanical keyboards now. All my little stations for all my stuff, it's all mechanicals. I don't mind the chiclets on my laptop, but I can type maybe half speed without a mechanical at this point.
So it really, you feel a lot faster and more productive with that. Is that the main draw of it, or?
Yes, for me. Like, yeah, there's something fun about the clicky clacky nature of it because it's like old hacking movies. It was always that click clack, the IBM Model M keyboard. But the scientific quote unquote explanation for what it's supposed to do is that because the key registers a press before it hits the bottom, it registers a press at the same time it makes a clicking sound, at least for the Cherry Blues. And so the second, or the millisecond rather, that I hear that click, I can stop pressing the key down and start letting it spring itself up because there's springs in there to press back. And so I can type much quicker because I don't have to kind of wait for the key to hit the bottom of something in order to know that my key press has been registered. So I can type much quicker because all I have to do is hear a click and then I can immediately start pushing the next key down is the only way to describe it. It's one of those weird subconscious things, like being able to type. I'm very quick at typing and it's just, yeah.
That's interesting. So I never got into the mechanical keyboards, but I have had a little bit of wrist problems, and I've been very interested in ergonomic design, and which is also why I bought the standing desk. So my keyboard is the Microsoft Sculpt ergonomic keyboard, and they have a couple different models, but this is just the wireless one. Currently, they sell it straight from Microsoft with also an ergonomic mouse, but somehow I managed to get one without the mouse. It comes with a separate number pad on the side, and it is very curved. It's one piece. You know, some ergonomic keyboards actually split apart, and you can actually get ergonomic and mechanical keyboards together, but this one I don't think would count as that. It's more just chiclet keys, but it is split in the center. Even though it's one piece, there's a space in the center, and it curves your two hands toward each other, and it also curves
keyboard.
Yeah, sort of. It lets your hands sit in a more natural position. Like if you just put your hand up on the desk, that's where it would land. And I find, just like you're saying with the mechanical keyboard, once you get used to that different shape, then I'm much faster with it because I'm used to it and everything feels very comfortable and exactly where I expect it to be. And then I do have to switch gears a little bit if I go type on my laptop keyboard. So to me, that ergonomic design, that, you know, relaxed hand position is more important than the feel of the keys. But I wouldn't be opposed to exploring something like, I think the company Kinesis does mechanical keyed ergonomic keyboards where there are actually two pieces that you can stage next to each other, one for each hand.
Carpal tunnel is no joke, and I'm really lucky that my whatever way of typing, I've never had any problems with my wrists ever. I'm very, very happy about that, but it is something very real to keep an eye on. You know, be very careful with your position. If anything about what you're doing makes your wrists hurt, try different things. Because if that stacks up, that can be really bad.
That leads to my trackball, which I have instead of a mouse, and for the same reasons. So this is the Logitech MX Ergo trackball, which again lets my hand sit in a natural position, kind of tilted to the side, and my thumb moves the trackball, and then I have the finger keys on the top. And for a long time, I was using a touchpad. For some reason, I just don't like mice. I don't know what it is about that. Maybe it's the gross pad. Like you were talking about, yours is fairly nice, but you know how they get gross. And Maybe it's that. Maybe it's just. I remember the old 80s and 90s mouse where you had to actually take the ball out and clean the inside. Well, you do have to do that with the trackball as well, but it's still just a nicer motion for me to keep my hand still and move the cursor.
You never
So
told me you used a trackball.
I do, and before that,
I
I was using an external touchpad, like a laptop touchpad, but just an external one, and that's where I got into trouble with ergonomics because I was using my middle finger a lot to move things around, and I was probably tapping too much with that single finger. And so then I switched to the trackball. Before I met you, so it's been 9 months or so.
So, how long did it take to get used to a trackball? Because I've heard really good things about them, but I've never used one myself.
A day, maybe. It was not hard for me at all. Like I said, I'm more used to a touchpad than a mouse, but a trackball, not really like either one of those.
I love the touchpads on at least the laptop I'm using, where you can use gestures, two fingers to scroll and, all of that. I turned some of them on, turned some of them off, tweaked mine a little bit. And I found myself working very quickly on just a laptop compared to the old, trackpads and all of that. It's something I really enjoy. And I can actually see doing that, like a full touchpad instead of a mouse. I never thought about that.
Yeah. So that's the one thing I really miss from switching from touchpad to a trackball is zooming with pinch to zoom.
Mm-hmm.
And so I actually have programmed, there's a couple extra buttons. There's like 3 extra buttons on the trackball besides the 2 main, mouse buttons and the scroll. And so if I press one of those, I've programmed it. So I press that button and then I use the scroller and it zooms for me.
Oh, that's super cool.
It's a pretty quick, shortcut that still lets me zoom without going back to the keyboard and finding, Control Plus or whatever.
Mm-hmm. So, I'm just using a really generic Logitech mouse right now because my old gaming one gave up the ghost. It wouldn't right click very well anymore. And I'm saving up to buy myself a brand new mouse at some point. I like the ones that have adjustable weights in them and everything. And my favorite thing is I will shout out to Logitech. Their scroll wheels in their higher end mice are amazing because they have this lock switch on there. And if it's locked, the scroll wheel is clicky, like you push it and you can feel it kind of click as it moves forward. And you can click the button to unlock it and it's a free wheel. And you can just spin it and it'll just keep going. So you can very quickly spin through code by unlocking it and then relock it really quick and go right back in an individual section. It comes in handy when you run into like 10,000 line CS files.
Yeah, no, I don't think this is Logitech too, but I don't think my scroller does that. I think it only does the clicky version. You can throw it pretty far, but it won't keep spinning. That's neat.
Yeah, I have a lot of Logitech branded stuff. I like a lot of their equipment. It's just really nice. My headset that I use, which is not what I'm using for microphone right now, is a Logitech. It's a G35. It's just a really simple quote unquote gaming headset, but it's comfortable and I only really use it as a headset. Right. I prefer listening to music out loud and I have my own office and I don't have to worry about the noise. So I have some Logitech Z623 speakers. These little like 2.1s with this huge subwoofer, and they are some of the nicest sounding speakers I've ever heard. And they kind of round out my entire setup.
Yeah, I like Logitech too. Obviously, my trackball's Logitech. I'm using, just for the audio end of it, I'm using our company provided Logitech H820 wireless headset, which is definitely not a gaming. It's much more of a business headset, but it works just fine for what I need. And I like that it has a little dock. Like it's wireless, but then it has its own charging dock that is wired. And so then it gets a nice strong signal. It stays charged, all of that. I have a couple of the things on my list. One is the Microsoft LifeCam webcam. Again, the company provided that for me, but works great. Nice, clear, crisp picture.
I have the exact same webcam. The company provided one is the one that I use. 1080p, widescreen, crystal clear, really nice wide picture. I use it as my main on everything. Before that, I was using just Logitech, some old one that only could do like 720. And that was just something cheap because I wanted it. But the company provided one is excellent.
Yeah, it's HD for sure, and very clear picture. So the only other thing I have on my list is the microphone I'm using right now, because like I said, the Logitech headset is great for listening. It's good enough for listening. I wouldn't say its audio microphone quality is good enough for a good podcast. And so Tim and I have been playing around with lots of different things. Actually, we discovered that the webcam that we were just talking about has a better microphone than the headset. And so is that what you're still using, is the webcam microphone?
Yes.
Yeah.
I almost pulled the trigger. There was a really good deal on a microphone that popped up the other day, and I almost pulled the trigger on it. But then I was realizing the way my desk is set up, I have to figure out an arm solution because there's nowhere I could actually realistically clamp it that wouldn't be in the way constantly. So once I figure out how I would mount it, then I'm going to buy a really nice setup.
Yeah, so that's what I did. I went on Amazon and found Ikadon USB condenser microphone, and I bought it, and it was like $60 or something. It was really inexpensive from Amazon. It came with an arm that you can mount. It came with the sound shield. The implosive. Yeah, it prevents the P's and K's and all those implosive sounds from exploding in the microphone. And it's a USB mic, so it just plugs right in, and it has a really nice clear sound. So I highly recommend finding something like that if you're doing any podcasting. But for day-to-day work, I just use the one that's built into the headset because it's easier. And if I am doing a video conference, people want to see my face, and they don't want to see my face buried into the microphone. Oh, one other piece of technology that's on my desk that I forgot about. So the company had given us Dell Thunderbolt docks where you could plug in your laptop and run your monitors. And those were okay, but we seem to have a lot of problems with them lasting and doing weird buggy things. And I discovered when I got my Surface that it's not Thunderbolt compatible, even though it has USB-C, which looks the same as a Thunderbolt port. It's not a Thunderbolt port. So I bought a new laptop dock from StarTech, which is the company, and it's a triple monitor dock. So I have two that are plugged into the display port, and then one that is just plugged into HDMI, which is the middle monitor that's only HD quality anyways. And that seems to work really nice. It also has, lots of USB ports on it, both the new USB-C and the older, bigger USB port. And so, yeah, everything's going into that. And the cool thing then is I can take my 3-monitor setup and I can switch from the company laptop to my Surface with just like one plug switching.
That's very cool.
Yeah. So,
I have the company provided dock, and it is just hooked up, and I never touch it, and it works fine. Plug in the work laptop, and I remote connect into it with my main computer, and it's all good.
Well, good. Yeah, I know yours has been working, and mine was mostly working. Other people had a lot more issues with that Dell dock, but it's not terrible. Especially if you're still using a Dell computer from work,
yes.
right?
Yes.
Yeah. So I think the Dell dock works really well with Dell PCs. And I just had to replace my work PC, and the new one's not Dell. And so it also didn't work great with that either. So gave me an opportunity to buy something else. Anything else on your desk, on your battle station that you want to talk about?
I have lots of coasters because I do drink at my computer, specifically lots of water throughout the day, and I keep them very far away from electronic components. I have lots of notes to myself. It's really nice to have Post-it notes all over my desk. It's my way of keeping track of things. Lots of cute animal toys from Japan and just detritus all over my desk. I like it with lots of flair, and it's really fun to, have lots of visual distraction throughout the day.
Yeah, I'm so not that kind of visual person. The other thing that's sitting on my desk is I decided I wanted some distraction too, but more like a game distraction. So I have the miniature NES and the miniature Sega Genesis that came out in the last decade, it's really just a little like Raspberry Pi or Linux machine inside, but it plays, and all the games are preloaded. And so I've got those two sitting over here with some controllers where I can just like flip one monitor over to that and play a game while I'm waiting for a build or doing something else. So that's kind of fun. A little retro gaming. And so then I think we should go to our hotspots.
Yes, and I teased my hotspot earlier, and that is something that is not on my desk. It is the thing that I sit on.
Okay.
So finding a good work chair has been a struggle. I've worked from home for quite some time, and basically up until that point, I sat in whatever. In Japan, when I started sitting all day long, there wasn't a lot of options for what I could order there. And so I got a generic gaming chair, one of those, I think it was orange and really terrible looking and all this other stuff, but it was moderately comfortable. It's just what I had there. And it was all right, but my back hurt because I would sit 8+ hours a day, and that's what it is. So I got back to America, and I had just different chairs. They were all just cheap chairs, and they were always really terrible. And I finally was like, you know what? Everybody keeps saying that you don't scrimp on money on anything that connects you to the ground. Shoes, tires, beds. And I'm like, I sit for 8+ hours a day, and everybody says it's really worth investing into an ergonomic chair. And I was like, all right, let's look into this. And they are expensive. And that is the biggest warning, like, hey, everybody, this is a thing. The one I'm sitting in is a Herman Miller Aeron chair. It is a very, very nice chair. I've owned this for 8 years now, I want to say, and it is perfect and wonderful. It creaks a little bit. That's my only complaint. I found a refurb seller on eBay, so it doesn't have the full lifetime warranty, but it was much cheaper, and I purchased it as a birthday present to myself, and it has changed how I can work. And that's the only way to say it is there. It's not a comfortable chair. It is not a chair that anybody would sit in and be like, oh, this is so luxurious, but it enforces posture. And I can sit in this chair for 8 hours, sometimes straight, and stand up, and my back doesn't hurt. Nothing hurts and nothing's uncomfortable. And I don't care how expensive it is because it is so worth it that a couple of years ago, my wife started working on her computer more, and I just bought her another one immediately because she was starting to complain about her back hurting or her legs getting a little numb. And as soon as she got a chair, it just was perfect.
That's great. I have not tried out one of those. I would be interested in trying it out. My chair is a cheap Staples office chair. I mean, it's got leather on it, which is kind of nice and feels luxurious, but it could actually get too hot in the summertime. And my solution for ergonomics, which is a cheaper solution, is a lumbar support cushion on that chair. And so I do have that, and I always make sure I'm sitting back all the way and using the lumbar support so that I have good posture. But I definitely would be interested in that because I'm very much interested in ergonomic design. So whenever I visit you, I'm going to have to try out your chair.
Oh, yeah. There are lots of different companies that make different chairs. I've heard good things like the Steelcase Leap. Generally speaking, though, if you're going to get a real ergonomic chair and not something that's claiming to be ergonomic but really isn't, you're probably looking at $500 or more, which, and went up and up and up and up, depending on how high you want to go. But it is one of those things, if you are intending on sitting for that long, it is well worth it. And if you do get them brand new, they have really insane warranties, although mine has been completely no problem. I've shipped it across the country. It is just bulletproof.
So my hotspot is also something that's on my desk, or it's actually software, and it has to do with my Surface. And nobody's going to be able to see this except Tim, but I'm going to show Tim while I'm doing this. And I did this in my class. You remember I'm teaching that class to teenagers about programming. And we were creating this Zork-like dungeon thing. And we were talking about navigation. And we were using system drawing point for navigation. And so I figured out that the Surface Book, you can flip the screen around and then close it and still have it plugged into the dock. And so now I have, in addition to my 3 monitors, I have a 4th monitor that I can draw on while I'm working. So I used this during the class yesterday to just show them. And the piece of software is just called Microsoft Whiteboard, and it comes with a Surface. I'm assuming probably any tablet PC, you can get a copy of that for free with Windows 10. And it's just really slick that I can just draw things and share, and I don't have to move. I don't have to do anything else. I can just have that available while I'm working.
Well, I hate to be nitpicky here, but your coordinate system is wrong. Everybody knows that 0, 0 is the upper left. Okay.
Okay.
And so it's plus Y.
I'll have to put a picture of my drawings so that everyone can see what you're talking about. But yes, so I had that conversation with my son, right? And I said, now, in UI, in computer design, most of the time, the Y coordinates positive goes down the screen. So 0 is the top of the screen and it goes down. And he said, really? And I said, yeah, I know what you're thinking. You know why I did it this way, don't you? Maybe you don't remember.
This is the way it's taught in school.
Well, this is algebra or trigonometry. Yeah. So in math, the Y coordinates go up as you get positive. And, that makes sense from like a graphing point of view and things like that, because most graphs show positive numbers both on the X and the Y coordinates. And so it makes sense to go up that direction. Otherwise, every bar chart you've ever seen would be upside down. And I don't know. It's interesting to me that UI design is the opposite direction. And I did point that out to him. But in this case, we're not doing any graphical user interface. We're only using these to keep track of a text-based game where you can travel north, south. So we're using the coordinates for north, south, east, and west. So it doesn't really matter as long as we all agree on which direction is positive and negative.
Well, given my laptop has a touch screen, I'm going to have to see if I can install that and get it working, because that could be useful.
Yeah. And I don't know. There are settings with the Surface Book where like the pen, like if I touch with my finger, it drags, but if I touch with the pen, it draws. And but I'm sure there's a way to set it so that you can draw with your finger, because I know the Surface pens will only work with Surface, of course. All right. Well, we made it an hour and 15 minutes.
Oh, we'll cut that down, I'm sure.
Yeah, we'll cut it down. Anything else to say today?
It was nice to get back to it. And it was fun. Yeah,
we took off last week. I put up a post about it, but Tim and I were both just very concerned about things that had been happening in the country, the protests and the Black Lives Matter movement, and we're very supportive of that. But it was hard to focus on anything else and to talk about silly things like we usually do when so many more serious things were going on in the world. And so we decided to take a week off there. And now we're back. And make sure you stop by and leave us a comment on the website, decode.software, or leave us a review on one of the podcasters like Apple Podcasts or Google Play. And let us know what you're enjoying, what you'd like to hear from us in the future, and tell us about your hardware setup, your battle station. What did we miss? What did we forget to talk about? All right. Hope everyone has a good week. We'll talk to you next time.
Later.